I wasn't thinking about danger that morning. I was just taking my grandson, Lucas, to the grocery store. The spring sun had come out after a week of rain, and he was chattering about blueberries and peanut butter. We were halfway across the intersection when a sedan, going way too fast, ran the red light. In a split second, I did what no one teaches you, but every grandmother instinctively knows. I threw myself over his tiny body. The car clipped us. My back hit the pavement hard. Lucas was shaken, but only scraped his cheek. I couldn't move. I couldn't even speak. But I remember hearing his cry and thanking God he was alive. Less than 15 minutes later, a whirlwind in designer heels and fury swept into the ER. Donna Whitaker, my son-in-law's mother. No greeting, no concern, just venom. How could you be so careless, Elaine? He's a child. If something had happened to him, I swear I'd sue you myself. I lay there, still on the stretcher, ribs burning, spine screaming, yet her words cut deeper than the bruises. Then my daughter Marissa arrived, not to comfort me, not to ask if I could breathe, but to rush to Lucas and Donna like I was the inconvenience that interrupted their day. I think my mother-in-law needs her blood pressure checked, she told the nurse. She got a little too emotional. I lay there stunned. I wasn't even acknowledged. My daughter had walked right past the woman who nearly died protecting her child. A doctor came out, tense. The patient has a serious laceration. We need surgery immediately. Marissa froze. Wait. Lucas just had a scratch. Who's bleeding? The nurse handed over the consent forms. Not your mother-in-law. Your mother. She's the one in critical condition. For a moment, even Donna went silent. But then came the sneer. Oh, please. She's just being dramatic. Anything to get out of trouble. As I was wheeled away to the OR, I caught Marissa's eyes. She still hadn't said a word to me. I reached for her hand anyway. I'll be okay. Go be with Lucas. She blinked back tears, but never said thank you. And as the anesthesia kicked in, I thought to myself, maybe the real emergency didn't start with the accident. Maybe it started the moment I forgot to live for myself. How many of us have spent decades giving everything, time, health, love, only to be treated like background noise in our own family's story? When did the people we raised start seeing our sacrifices as obligations instead of love? At what point does protecting others start costing you yourself? I woke up groggy in a whitewashed hospital room, the scent of antiseptic sharp in my nostrils. My right leg was immobilized in a splint, and I could feel the throbbing pulse of stitched skin along my lower back. My throat burned like sandpaper. I blinked slowly, trying to recall how I got there. The woman in the bed beside mine, maybe mid-40s with warm eyes, smiled gently. You're lucky. My mom had the same injury. She didn't wake up for 2 days. I tried to speak, but only managed a hoarse whisper. Where's my daughter? She hesitated. I think she went to the pharmacy. Her mother-in-law wasn't feeling well. Of course. Donna. A nurse came in, adjusted the bed, and offered a quick reassurance. It's a minor fracture with some blood loss. You'll be okay in about 10 days. Try to rest. But I didn't rest. I couldn't. My body was too bruised, too sore, and my mind. It was screaming. Just then, I heard Donna's unmistakable voice echoing from the hallway. Marissa, you have to talk to her. She can't keep being so careless. What if next time it's worse? I swear I'll file a complaint. Marissa replied quietly, almost submissively. I'll talk to her, Donna. She'll be more careful. Careful. I had nearly died shielding Lucas. And still, I was the problem. Also, Donna continued, her tone turning shrill, Andrew is already stretched thin. Who's going to handle the laundry, the meals, the housework? We don't have time to babysit her, too. Their words slipped under the curtain like poison gas. I curled on my side, away from them, tears soaking the pillow. My ribs ached with every breath, but not as much as my heart. And then I heard Marissa say, almost like it was a confession, she knows her place. That sentence pierced me deeper than any scalpel ever could. Her place. What was my place? The unpaid housekeeper? The invisible grandmother? The live-in nanny with no rights? I thought of the night Marissa called me crying, begging for help. Mom, I can't do this alone. Please come stay with us, please. And I came. I left my retirement, my routines, my friends. I cleaned, I cooked. I paid for groceries without complaint. For 3 years, I had been the silent engine behind their home. And now I was just the woman who should have known her place. Donna strutted into the room minutes later, placing a paper plate with a slice of white bread and mustard on my table. Figured you'd like this, she said smugly. Simple, not greasy. Your daughter says you love mustard toast. The woman in the next bed nearly choked on her water. She just had surgery. That's what you're feeding her? Marissa even laughed. She really does like it. She eats slice after slice. But I remembered. I remembered Marissa sobbing years ago, pregnant, alone, telling me how Donna had forced her to eat mustard toast daily, how Andrew never stood up for her. Mustard toast wasn't comfort. It was a weapon disguised as a meal. When Marissa leaned down and asked, Mom, don't you like it? Her eyes pleading for peace, I finally found my voice. I just had surgery. What I need is rest, not this. Her face shifted from concern to irritation. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't about mustard. It was about control, about how long I'd allowed myself to shrink so they could stand taller. And I wasn't going to do it anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Not from pain, but from the slow-burning realization that everything I had poured into that house, into them, had been taken for granted. I stared at the ceiling tiles until dawn, wondering how many years I had left and how many more I was willing to waste being invisible. At 7 a.m., Marissa arrived again, holding a to-go coffee and a grocery bag. I noticed she didn't bring anything nutritious, just dry cereal bars and a half-crushed banana. She sat down beside my bed, her face pale, anxious. Look, Mom, she said quickly, I know things got a little tense yesterday. Donna didn't mean to be so harsh. She worries a lot. I said nothing. She tried again. And Andrew, he's just under stress, between work and bills and Mom's medication. Bills! I croaked, cutting her off. You mean the $8,000 hospital bill he dumped on my table? Her eyes widened. He told me he explained that already. It's just temporary, Mom. We're not asking for much. We covered the emergency costs, and once you're better, you can pay us back. That's fair, right? I sat up slowly, my back still aching, and looked her dead in the eyes. Do you even realize what you're saying? I threw myself in front of a car for your son. I bled on the pavement. And you're handing me an invoice? She looked embarrassed, defensive. You're making this bigger than it is. No, I said sharply. You made it bigger the moment you let them treat me like I was disposable. Just then, her phone buzzed. She answered in a whisper, turning away. Yes, I'm at the hospital. Yes, I'll transfer it now. Are you outside? When she hung up, she turned to me again, voice tight. That was Andrew. He's waiting downstairs. Look, Mom, we're drowning. His mom's medical costs, daycare, rent, it's all piling up. If you don't help, we're going to fall apart. Do you really want that for your grandson? I stared at her, speechless. After all the dinners, the sleepless nights, the diapers, the cleaning, after 3 years of being their unpaid maid, this is what I got? Guilt-tripped with Lucas's name? Pay Andrew back, she continued. Please, just transfer the money. It's not like it's going anywhere else. Eventually, it's ours, right? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. But I took the water cup on my tray and threw it, splashing her face, soaking her blouse. Get out! Her mouth fell open in disbelief. What is wrong with you? You want to know what's wrong? I rasped. I stayed. I gave everything. And still, none of it was enough for you. I reached for the phone on the table and called the only number I still knew by heart. Hi, it's me, I said when he picked up. Come get me, please. I want to come home. There was silence on the other end. Then Edward's warm, steady voice. I'll be there at sunrise. I'll bring Jason to help carry your things. When I hung up, Marissa looked at me like I'd committed treason. You're just going to leave? Walk out? What happens to Lucas? I turned away. You're his mother. Figure it out. She tried one last tactic. Fine. You want to leave? Then give me your pension card. I need it more than you do. I froze. She didn't ask how I'd manage, how I'd pay for recovery. She just wanted the card, the money. Her eyes gleamed, not with gratitude, but calculation. I'm struggling in a city I barely know. Andrew's salary barely covers Donna's pills. If you give me your card, I'll let you go in peace. In that moment, I realized something devastating. This wasn't my daughter anymore. This was someone I had created, fed, clothed, educated, but who had turned into a stranger shaped by entitlement. Wordlessly, I handed her the card. Her expression lit up like she'd won the lottery. Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd come through for us. What she didn't know? The moment she left the room, I called the bank, reported the card as lost, ordered a replacement, canceled every automatic payment. I wouldn't teach her the lesson, not with words. Let her figure it out when her version of control turned to dust. 2 hours later, Jason arrived with Edward. They rolled in a suitcase, packed neatly by Marissa, like she was shipping off a burden she'd finally unloaded. She even threw in a granola bar and said, Here, something for the road. I didn't respond. Just looked around the hospital room one last time. I had walked into this hospital broken, bleeding, and unsure. I was leaving with my spine straighter than it had been in years. And for the first time since moving into Marissa's home, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Power. The ride home was quiet, except for the hum of the tires. Jason sat beside me in the back seat, carefully guarding my suitcase while Edward drove. I looked out the window, trying to brace myself for the emotions waiting at the end of the road. When we pulled into the driveway, everything looked exactly the same, and yet, somehow, it wasn't. The porch light was on, the flower pots still sat by the steps, but something about the air felt wrong. As soon as Edward unlocked the front door, a sharp voice echoed from inside. About damn time. I've been picking up after your daughter's mess for days. It was Joanne, Andrew's mother, wearing one of my sweaters, dragging a trash bag across the hardwood floor like she owned the place. Edward stiffened beside me. I could feel the rage radiating off him. I stepped inside and stopped cold. The house wasn't ours anymore. Our living room rug was stained. My framed wedding photos had been turned to face the wall. There were cereal bowls left to rot on the coffee table. Andrew lay sprawled on the couch in his socks, playing a video game with the sound turned up like nothing was out of place. Joanne muttered, That daughter of yours whines nonstop about how hard it is to raise a kid, but she wasn't complaining when she skipped lectures and got herself knocked up. I felt sick. Then I saw something that made my knees weaken. Lucas was sitting at the dining table, wearing my silk scarf, the one Edward gave me for our 30th anniversary. It had been tied around his neck like a bib. I rushed over and untied it, cradling it like it was a piece of myself. Lucas screamed, No! I want Mommy. I don't want the old witch. My heart cracked. I knelt in front of him. Sweetheart, who told you to call me that? He just sobbed. But I already knew. Joanne stepped forward and said, I did. Because that's what you are? A bitter old woman who's done nothing but make things harder for my son. You owe us, and you better start acting like it. Edward didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Yes, officer, we've returned from medical leave and found our home entered illegally. Items are missing. People are inside who don't belong here. Andrew jumped to his feet. You're calling the cops on your own family? Just then, 2 security guards from the neighborhood patrol arrived. Andrew lunged toward Edward, but was immediately restrained. Marissa ran in from the kitchen, eyes wide. Mom! Dad! Stop! Okay, I let them in. I didn't know what else to do. We were locked out. I changed the locks. It was only temporary. The property manager followed, stunned. Wait, you're her parents? She told us she was living here alone with her kid, abandoned. She's been live streaming it all. People donated money to help her. Marissa's face went pale. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling, and opened TikTok. Her face stared back at me, crying in the dark. Caption: My parents left me and my child to rot in an empty house while they vacation. My hand went cold. I turned to her and slapped her, not out of hatred, but grief. You filmed this in my home, wearing my clothes, after stealing my peace. She didn't deny it. She just glared, like I was the one betraying her. Joanne snapped, Hand over your pension card, and maybe we'll forget this ever happened. That was it. Edward stepped forward and slammed the broom handle to the floor. You think this woman owes you her retirement? Her dignity? Her peace? The only reason she even came back into your lives was love. And look what you did to it. Andrew barked, We paid her hospital bills. You think we're just gonna let that go? I looked at him coldly. I have every receipt. You think I didn't keep records? Every formula can, every diaper pack, every utility bill. Want to go to court? We can calculate every cent. He opened his mouth to argue, but the sirens were already blaring outside. Officers entered. Joanne and Andrew were cuffed on the spot. Even in handcuffs, Andrew shouted, This is a setup! They framed us! They left us no choice! As the door closed behind them, I turned to Marissa. She sat on the couch holding Lucas, blank-eyed. Mom, she finally said, are you really going to press charges on all of us? I looked her square in the eye. You want to know why you're not in cuffs too? Because we asked them to spare Lucas, but don't test that mercy twice. She blinked, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Fear. Not of punishment, of consequences. The next morning, our house was a mess of silence and shame. Edward and I didn't sleep in our own bed that night. We checked into a motel 2 blocks away, not because we lacked space, but because we no longer recognized our home. By dawn, a cleaning crew was already scrubbing floors and disinfecting walls. I sat on a bench across the street, sipping lukewarm tea, watching them toss out bags of our stained clothes, shattered dishes, and what was left of our once orderly life. Back inside, Marissa sat on the couch, still holding Lucas, her expression vacant. She hadn't said a word since the police took Joanne and Andrew away. It was almost like the house had taken her voice too. Around noon, she finally broke the silence. Mom, you really called the police? On Andrew, on his mother, on me? I didn't look up. Yes, she swallowed. Everyone else is decorating for New Year's, cooking, celebrating, and we're here, like criminals. I turned toward her slowly. Because you broke into our home, lied, stole, and you expect me to treat that like a misunderstanding? She flinched. I didn't steal anything. Oh no, I said, my voice sharper now. You stole trust. You stole peace. You took the last ounce of love I was still willing to give. She looked away. And just so you know, I continued, Andrew and Joanne told the officers you orchestrated everything, said you planned the break-in, let them in, handed over the keys. Her face turned ghost white. They said that? I nodded. The only reason you're not behind bars is because Edward and I begged the officers to consider Lucas. But if you'd prefer we didn't. No, she blurted, standing abruptly. I didn't think. I didn't know it would get this far. That's because you've spent your whole life thinking actions don't have consequences, I said. And I let you. I thought being your mother meant giving endlessly. But I was wrong. Tears welled up in her eyes. I just wanted help. I didn't mean for it to turn into this. I crossed the room, opened the cabinet, and pulled out a folder I'd kept hidden for years. Receipts, account statements, checks I'd written for her rent, Lucas's doctor visits, groceries, tutoring, every financial trail leading back to me. I dropped it in front of her. You want to talk about help? Here, start counting. She opened the folder, flipped through a few pages, then shut it gently. You're keeping score now? She asked quietly. No, I said. I'm keeping record. Because the only people who accuse others of keeping score are the ones who've never paid for anything themselves. She stood there for a long time, blinking back tears. Then she said, "You're going to post that video, aren't you?" "What video?" "The one you recorded yesterday, when you walked in on us." I paused, then nodded. Her voice cracked. "If you post that, everyone will see. I'll lose everything. The people who donated, my job, my reputation." I crossed my arms. "You should have thought of that before turning my pain into content." Her eyes flashed. "So that's it? You're cutting me off? Just like that?" I studied her. This woman who had once clung to my leg on her first day of kindergarten, who I had stayed up with through high fevers, dance recitals, breakups, and now she looked at me like I was the villain. "I'm not cutting you off," I said. "You did that all on your own." She turned and stormed toward the door, but just before leaving, she whispered, "You'll regret this." I didn't respond. Later that night, I uploaded the video. No dramatic music, no filters, just me and Edward standing in the wreckage of our home. Calm. Director. "Hello. My name is Ellen Myers. You may have seen a video online claiming my daughter and grandson were abandoned, that they were living in filth while I vacationed. Today, I'm here to tell the truth." I laid it out. The years of sacrifice, the medical bills, the groceries, the emotional toll. I told them about the lies, the donations she collected from strangers while we were recovering from surgery and trauma. I told them about the break-in, the police report, the betrayal. I ended the video with one sentence. "As of today, we no longer recognize our daughter as part of our family." Within hours, the comments exploded. Heartbreaking but necessary. I watched both videos. "The truth matters. Thank you for speaking up." "She lied for clout. I donated. I want my money back." What kind of daughter does this to her own mother? Rachel's streaming account was banned. People reported her for fraud. Sponsors pulled out, donations stopped. By morning, she was exposed. And alone. Edward looked over at me as we sat on the motel balcony. "You okay?" I nodded. "Not healed yet, but better." Then his phone buzzed. He picked it up, frowned, and handed it to me. "Rachel." The message read, "Andrew's fired. Joanne's had a stroke. We've lost the car, the house. Please, I'm begging you." I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted it. We didn't reply. Not this time. And I knew, this silence, finally, was the sound of peace. We sold the house 2 weeks later. There was no ceremony, no final walkthrough. Just a quick signature at a quiet notary office and a silent ride to the airport. Edward and I boarded a flight to Santa Barbara, the coast glowing beneath us like a long-forgotten promise. We didn't look back. The cottage was small but perfect. Sunlight spilled through lace curtains every morning, and the air smelled faintly of salt and rosemary. Edward spent hours in the garden, pruning tomato vines and planting marigolds. I took up sketching again, something I hadn't done since college. Most days, we barely spoke more than a dozen words to each other, and somehow, that silence healed more than years of conversation ever had. For the first time in decades, I wasn't responsible for anyone else's meals, medication schedules, or last-minute daycare pickups. The only child I needed to soothe was the one in me, worn thin by decades of sacrifice and neglect. But peace, as I've learned, is often interrupted by those who can't stand to see you finally have it. It began with phone calls. First, unknown numbers, blocked. Then, messages from strangers. Anonymous insults, graphic images, threats typed with careless rage. At first, we were frightened. Edward reported everything to the police, and they traced the activity back to one place: Denver, where Andrew still lived. It didn't surprise me. The man always preferred warfare to apology. But I wasn't the same woman he thought I was. I compiled every message, every voicemail, every screenshot, and mailed a bound packet directly to the HR department of Andrew's government job. I filed a digital harassment report and included the police case number, complete with officer signatures. Just 3 days later, we received an email confirmation. Andrew Whitaker was terminated for misconduct and workplace violations. His employer had also filed a formal complaint to the state. Edward and I were sitting on the porch that morning, coffee in hand, when the message came through. The sea breeze ruffled his gray hair as he smiled at me over the rim of his mug. "I think we've done enough cleaning for one lifetime," he said. I nodded. Let's leave the rest for the tide. But peace, it seemed, was something Rachel still refused to let go of. The next message wasn't anonymous. It came from her directly. "Mom, he got fired. Grandma Joanne had a stroke. We lost everything. Are you really going to do nothing?" We didn't reply. The silence, for once, wasn't awkward. It was armor. Later that week, we changed our numbers, closed our old bank accounts, and moved again, this time to a small mountain town where no one knew our names. We lived among retired school teachers and quiet couples who grew lavender and sang at church picnics. Here, we weren't Mom or Dad. We were just Ellen and Edward. One spring afternoon, we attended a community tea gathering for seniors. Everyone was asked to write a note to their future selves, a blessing or a truth they wanted to remember. I stared at my card for a long time before writing just one line: "May you never again mistake sacrifice for love." Edward peeked over and read it. He placed his weathered hand over mine. "So, are you free now?" he asked gently. I smiled. Not the polite, practiced kind I had used for years, but the kind that creased your cheeks and reached your chest. "I think I finally am." We never spoke of Rachel again. Not because we hated her, but because we no longer needed to carry her choices. Months passed. Then, on a crisp October morning, a letter arrived. No return address, but I knew that handwriting like I knew my own reflection. It was from Rachel. Inside was a single photograph of Lucas, standing next to a public library donation box, holding a handmade sign that read, "Thank you, Grandma. I hope you're happy." There were no words, just the photo. I stared at it for a long time. Edward, seeing the way my hands trembled, asked if I was okay. "I'm fine," I said softly, sliding the photo back into the envelope and placing it in the drawer beneath my sketchbooks. "Are you going to write back?" "No," I said. "Some stories need an ending, not a sequel." He pulled me into a hug. We stood there, letting the quiet wrap around us like a blanket. Because we finally understood, forgiveness doesn't always mean returning. Love doesn't always mean staying. And motherhood, true, unselfish motherhood, sometimes means walking away to survive. That was the last time we spoke of her. And you know what? That silence has never sounded sweeter. It had been nearly a year since we last heard from her. Edward and I had settled fully into our mountain life. The cottage now had a wraparound porch. We grew sweet peas in the front yard and tomatoes in old whiskey barrels that our neighbor gifted us. In the evenings, we played cards and read poetry aloud, our laughter carrying into the trees. There was peace in the quiet, a kind of stillness that comes only after a long, loud storm. But as life would have it, the past has a habit of testing you just when your hands have finally stopped shaking. It started with a video. A young woman, barely out of college, recognized me at the farmer's market. She was selling bracelets made from river glass. When she asked for a photo, I hesitated but agreed. A few days later, she uploaded the video with the caption, "The sweetest retired couple weaving bracelets and stories, real-life goals." It went viral, and then came the backlash. Because a few days later, another video surfaced. This one from Rachel. Filmed in a dim, cluttered room, her eyes red from crying. Lucas sat beside her, quiet and still. She stared into the camera and said, "While my parents live their best lives, my son and I are spending Christmas in a freezing, moldy apartment. They cut me off when I needed them most." The internet lost its mind. "Monsters," one comment read. How could parents abandon their own child and grandson? Another, this generation of narcissistic boomers has no shame. I watched it all unfold from our kitchen table, my tea growing cold as the screen filled with hate. And then, as if on cue, Andrew uploaded a photo of my old hospital bill, my name printed clearly across the top. His caption, "She took our savings. I paid for her treatment. Now she won't even return a call." It was cruel, but worse than that, it was calculated. They had turned our silence into a weapon. I looked at Edward, his eyes dark with fury. "What do we do?" he asked. I already knew. I opened my laptop, pulled out the footage from our security camera, the one we had installed months ago, the day we came home and found our house ransacked. I began to edit. Not for drama, for clarity. A clean voiceover, no tears, no yelling. Just the truth. The next morning, I uploaded the video. The truth behind the lies. I told our story, beginning to end. How I had left my home and retirement to care for a daughter who cried for help. How I cooked, cleaned, nursed her son, covered their bills for 3 straight years. How I had protected my grandson from an oncoming car, suffered injuries, only to wake up in the hospital and be handed a bill. How they broke into our home, stole our things, live-streamed their lies to thousands of strangers. And finally, how we chose to walk away, not out of cruelty, but out of the final ounce of love we had left for ourselves. The response was immediate. "You owe no one your pain. Thank you for showing what quiet dignity looks like." This is what survival after betrayal looks like. Rachel's social media accounts were banned for fraud. The donation platforms suspended her campaigns. Andrew? Fired again. This time, the HR department had more than enough. He made one last mistake. He sent me an email, just one line. "You think you've won, old woman, but your story's not over yet." I sent the message, and every prior threat, to his employer's legal department and the state cybercrime unit. 3 weeks later, we received confirmation. Andrew was under investigation for harassment, slander, and misuse of personal records. He would be required to pay restitution for the break-in, plus the unpaid $20,000 loan I had once foolishly handed him for a car. Even his father, who had remained in the shadows for years, was forced to step in to keep his golden boy from jail. He sold off his SUV and mortgaged his duplex. But none of that mattered anymore, because just days after that, Rachel came back, not with an apology, but with another plea. She showed up at our gate in a borrowed coat, Lucas in her arms. Her voice trembled. "I left Andrew. I really did. But we have nowhere to go. You're my mother. Please." I looked at her. This woman I once nursed through broken hearts and late-night fevers. This daughter who now stood before me like a stranger with my blood. "I'm sorry," I said softly, "but my home is no longer your shelter. It's my sanctuary," she sobbed. "So that's it? After everything? You'd abandon your own daughter?" Edward stood beside me, silent, steady. The porch light behind us glowed warm, like a line drawn in gold. "No," I said. "I raised you. I sacrificed for you. But I will no longer allow you to turn that love into leverage." She turned and walked away, shoulders hunched against the cold. I didn't cry. That night, I wrote in my journal, "The final act of motherhood is not holding on. It's knowing exactly when to let go." We never heard from her again. Not in person, not through lawyers, not even a birthday card left unsigned. And that, in itself, was a kind of gift. After everything, after the lies, the betrayal, the courtroom threats, and social media smears, Rachel finally disappeared from our lives. There was no apology, no redemption arc, only silence. But for once, silence didn't sting. It soothed. Edward and I leaned fully into the life we had rebuilt. We took pottery classes at the senior center and walked hand in hand through local art fairs. Every morning, we brewed coffee in a hand-painted mug that said "Start fresh," and every evening, we lit a candle just for the ritual of stillness. One spring afternoon, our neighbors invited us to a backyard picnic. There was no agenda, just grilled corn, lawn chairs, and stories about old dogs and first loves. Someone brought out a guitar, and someone else a homemade pie. It wasn't lavish, but as I watched Edward laugh with a retired mailman and a former opera singer, I realized something. This was the family we never expected to find, but always needed. No judgment, no guilt, just belonging. I wasn't mom or grandma here. I was Ellen, an artist, a friend, a woman who had survived a storm and learned to enjoy the sun. I still kept the photo Rachel sent that one time, Lucas holding a sign that said, "Thank you, Grandma." It sat in a drawer, tucked between letters from old friends and postcards from places we wanted to visit. I didn't display it, but I didn't throw it away either. Because forgiveness, I've learned, doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it just means releasing the weight. There were days I wondered how Lucas was doing, if he remembered how I used to hum lullabies while folding his onesies, if he ever missed the way I cut his fruit into stars. But those thoughts came like clouds, passing, soft, never heavy enough to darken the sky. Edward often said, "We lost the title of parents, but we gained the freedom of people." And he was right, because when you live for decades being someone's safety net, it's easy to forget that you were a whole person before they ever needed you. And if you're lucky, if you're brave, you get to become that person again. I'm not waiting for reconciliation. I'm not holding my breath for regret. I'm just breathing, one clean, honest breath at a time. Because this, finally, is what peace looks like when it stays. There comes a time in life, especially for those of us who have raised children, sacrificed dreams, and given beyond our means, when we must ask, what is left for me? This story reminds us that love without boundaries becomes a trap, not a gift. It shows the painful truth that not every child grows into the adult we hope to raise, and that continuing to give, in the face of manipulation or disrespect, only depletes us further. Many of us were taught that motherhood, or family, means endless giving. But age brings wisdom, and the greatest wisdom may be this: choosing peace over obligation is not selfish, it's survival. You are allowed to reclaim your time, your name, your dignity. You are allowed to say, enough. And you are not less of a parent, or less of a person, for walking away from those who only love you when you're useful. At any age, starting over is brave. And choosing yourself, after a lifetime of being invisible, is a revolution.